let's go ahead and get rolling. Welcome back to Strategy Immersion Training. We are now in week 6 of Strategy Immersion Training, and today this is a very, very narrowly focused conversation because we're going to talk about where a coach usually starts in the coaching conversation and then where they need to get to in order to be effective in coaching. So as I might have mentioned before, if you're not in strategy immersion training, or if you're new to these live streams, we're actually doing these lives as a part of an advanced training, what I call an immersion training, where you're fully immersed in learning very specific skill sets as a coach. And in this one, we call it strategy immersion training. So these are chances to go much deeper and much more in depth than we have time to go into in the actual training sessions themselves. So we fill in all the little cracks, all the little niches, all the little openings for and needing the need for, let's say, additional detail so that you can really master this aspect, or what I call this discipline of coaching. So today I'm talking about how to bridge from listening to coaching. And this is an issue because coaches are naturally great listeners, right? That's part of what makes us want to coach is we care about people, we want to help, and we're interested. We actually have an interest. I mean, there are maybe a few coaches that aren't like that, and might be attracted to the profession for other reasons. But one of the biggest reasons why somebody wants to coach is they want to listen. They want to understand somebody. They want to get into somebody else's world rather than just kind of stay in their own me, selfish phase of their existence. So, it's not necessarily a skill set that coaches have automatically, but many of them do. And for that matter, also, they have a desire to really listen and understand. So, which is phenomenal. And look, as a coach, I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you, if you don't understand your client, you haven't listened to your client, and you're just off the wall, kind of in your own little world, wanting to tell them your coaching thing, you're going to fail in your ability to transform your client. You're going to fail to influence them at the deepest level, at least, and you are unlikely to be effective as a coach with your client. So listening is absolutely critical. And so this part of the process of coaching that we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks is what I call diagnosis, but really ultimately it's just understanding what makes your client tick, understanding like why they do what they do, what's getting in their way, what their blind spots might be, kind of what their tendencies or styles are. We could go on and on about discussing this, but you get the idea. It's like you really want to be able to get your client, right? You need to be able to get your client. So that's that first aspect that we in strategy coaching call diagnosis. But the bottom line is it's just understanding their world and understanding why things are going the way they are. Because if they truly need to transform, they want to transform either their experience of life or their performance level or their activity and what they're up to. They want to broaden the power of their existence. You're going to need to understand where they're at, right? If you want to know how to get someone where they want to go, you got to start with understanding where they're at, because if you don't understand where they're at, there's no way to navigate where they want to be. I wasn't planning on drawing a picture here, but think of it this way. I mean, are we fairly in focus? I guess we are. So, you know, like if I know my client wants to be here, this is what we call point B, you know, so if that's all I know is, hey, this is what my client wants, this is where they want to be, right here, point B, that's the promised land. My client knows it, I know it, we're on the same page with that, but I don't know where they are in this world. I just don't know where they fall. I'll never get them there. That's absolutely impossible. I mean, in this metaphor of kind of navigating like a map would navigate, right? It's just no way. Because I'm going to say, well, okay, point B, well, you should probably turn right. You know, you probably go north. right? Because it's kind of near the top of the map. Well, what if they're here, right? Well, then they're off the map, right? Or if I say, well, turn right, but they're already over here, they're off the map again. So you fail if you don't know where your client's at. I mean, that should go without saying at this point, especially as we're talking about diagnosis, understanding your client's world. But you got to know, hey, point A is right here. This is A. Sorry, I keep writing B, keep thinking B. And then I know, okay, well, you got to go east, northeast. And then you're going to get to point B. So that's why listening is important. You don't know where they're at. You don't know what's getting in their way. You don't know what's happening for them inside and outside. You can't strategize with your client. That's just impossible. But if you do nothing but listen and understand where they're at, even if you know where they want to go, like you know point B, you know point A, you know all that, it still doesn't mean you're going to be able to help them. And the reason I say that is simple, is that part of coaching is offering your client different perspectives. Part of coaching is transformation, not just understanding and awareness. You want to be an awareness coach and that's it? Okay, I suppose. You want to be just a dedicated listener, like a friend? Okay. I mean, then I guess you're not really committed to anything more for your client. But if you're truly committed to your client transforming their life or the business, your client getting from point A to point B, your client being accountable for what it takes to get there, your client making the changes they need to make, your client getting past their blind spots, like really changing things for themselves, which is why most coaching clients sign up for coaching in whatever niche or area or genre they're signing up for. Well, then at some point you've got to bridge from listening to coaching. At some point you've got to not stop listening. I mean, you're always going to listen, right? But your center of gravity has to move from this world of, I get you, and I'm just going to be here and understand, and I'm just here to take it all in, right? And just be like, I just want to be in your world, right? I just want to appreciate you, right? You got to move from that world to your center of gravity being coaching. Now I'm here to coach you, right? So a listener alone can't coach. And by the way, a coach, somebody who's just coaching alone, they're not going to be very effective with their coaching. We just talked about why. So think of it this way, like if I'm your counselor and I'm just sitting you down on the couch and I'm just going to listen and take notes and I don't ever tell you anything, just let you kind of, like talk therapy, just talk yourself to death. Well, you might feel like I understand you at some point, but it'll be a roll of the dice as to whether or not you change, right? Now, the other world that we're talking about, the coach world, think of that like, if I was a baseball coach or a football coach, part of my job is not just to be like, well, what do you want to do, guys? What kind of scrimmages do you want to run? Or, what do you think about baseball? Tell me about your feeling. Like, yes, we need to do that to some extent, but my center of gravity is going to be much more based in, guys, time to do the drills. Okay, run. Okay, now we're going to run these 5 scrimmages today. Okay, this is what you need to improve. This is what you're doing wrong. This is what you need to take to the next level. You're not seeing that. Run around this way. I don't know. I'm not a sports coach, right? But you get the idea, right? You've got to move from just taking it all in and appreciating your players and just like wanting to understand where their world is and moving them to another world. You got to coach them, not just listen. We hear this again and again. I mean, in the sports world, this is common. I mean, most of us have heard this story of Michael Jordan starting out with his coach, and his coach didn't even let him be on the team. And the coach said, you want to really be on the team? Come 6 a.m., I'm going to train you. And he drilled and drilled and drilled. He wasn't just like, well, you don't really want to try that hard, Michael, so I understand, right? It wasn't just the listener. What made Michael Jordan was, I mean, obviously, before he even got the coaches, like a father that he wanted to please, and he was really competitive with his brothers. And there was a lot of psychology that the coach utilized and stacked other elements of coaching on top of those hungers and those drives, right? And when you hear Jordan talk about it, there's tears in his eyes about how he really wanted to compete, how he wanted to be the best. He needed that because his father was a source of love for him, and being the best meant love, right? But the coach didn't just say, well, just whatever you feel like doing is good enough. He said, no, you want to be on this team, you want to meet my standards, well, then you need to do this and this and this. And he was coaching, not just listening. So I hope that gives you a sense of why you need to make this transition, why you need to bridge from listening to coaching. So, what kind of coach are you? Are you more of just a listener and you're a little bit more passive and you just take someone in and appreciate them and kind of let them kind of do what they do and cheerlead them? Or are you more of the coach? It's like, I'm going to tell them what for, and I'm going to change them around, and I'm going to fix things right away, and just hammer them with coaching. Most of us have a center of gravity one way or the other, and so it's easy to get stuck in one. But as we've talked about, if you're in strategy immersion training, have been working with you on in these 5 master steps, is that the first step is listening, i.e. diagnosing. Listening in a very specific way, asking very specific questions, understanding their world, understanding like what they're really after, what their drives are, and what's preventing them from getting that, what beliefs are running the show, what vehicles they're interacting with, right? And then the mindset that they utilize, that's all plugged into, those beliefs are orchestrating, so to speak. The triad, or the physiology and language that those beliefs are plugged into or locked into, right? Like that's just the way people are. But if all I know is that, then I'm not going to transform my client. I just know, like, we could talk about our client, like we could gossip about them. Well, they believe this and they think this and this is what their needs are and this is what they do and this is why their life is the way they, like, that's fine. But that, just knowing that makes no difference. I mean, it gives you a possibility of transforming somebody, but it doesn't do it. It doesn't do the job, right? So you've got to start with some listening. You got to start by diagnosing accurately and well. But then besides and beyond that, then you got to bridge. You got to bridge over to coaching. Now, this is usually not a very tactful or elegant segue for most coaches, though. Right? It's not a very powerful one either for most clients because of the way the coach makes that transition. So the coach will usually just say something like, okay, well, I think I understand what's going on. Let me just tell you what I think, right? Or the coach will just kind of keep asking leading questions to try to get the client to get it. That's kind of more of the classical dogma of coaching, is just ask powerful questions and they'll just work it out themselves, right? And this is a little bit of where I break with kind of the common expectation that many people that try to appease the ICF core competencies work through. And I don't even think ICF feels this way or thinks this way because I've talked to them. But I mean, because some of the competencies are direct communication and accountability and just really managing action and progress. That's not just like taking somebody in and cheerleading them. So making this transition is what we're talking about here. So couple things first before we get into how to actually do this. The first time I learned this, I would watch my original coaching mentor, Tony Robbins, do what he did as a coach, and he would do it in front of thousands of people in an audience in a demo, and I would learn from what he said and how he'd influence people. But what was really interesting, what I found watching him, was that he had the ability to not only understand somebody by asking some questions and probing and provoking even at times, but he would always nail like the linchpin issue for that client, so to speak, or that individual that he was intervening with at the time, and especially the linchpin in the mind of that client as well, not just like the external issues. And he would do that though live, in conversation, and share it with that client in a way where they would be motivated to change it. It's one thing just to know what it is. It's another thing to tell them what's going on. But what Tony was really specialized in was what he would call leverage in the process of change, which is really that second master step, is leveraging a client, having their motivation shift, right? But he would be able to actually share what he understood about somebody with a client in such a way where they'd already be pretty motivated to change it. And that's a real power that I was really amazed by. But I would take copious notes and figure out exactly what he said and what order he said it in. And when he'd work with the coaches and the trainer body that I was a part of at the time, he would also try to teach us, because he wanted us to be really good at this too, because he was adding value to his audience, his customers. And so what he would constantly say is, I will understand their world, but then I will explain it to them in a very specific way so that as I talk to them about it, they can feel the need to change. They can feel the need to change. And he would do it in very, very intense ways. For anybody who's been in that environment, you know what I'm talking about probably. So what I'm about to share with you is exactly the way that I've interpreted his work in this very specific part of not getting the leverage completely, but starting to get leverage through bridging from the diagnosis process to the coaching process. The point where I know what's going on, I know what's stopping somebody, I understand, I've properly diagnosed what their issues are, blind spots are, barriers are, etc. And now we're getting to the point where it's time to actually make a change, where it's time for me as the coach to facilitate the changes that client now needs to make and support them in doing so powerfully enough such that they really do, even if they don't even get it for themselves just yet. So for this purpose, I've actually, because these conversations are really they're not exactly word for word, but I want to give you some very specific understandings here. I'm going to move over to some slides because I didn't just want to write constantly and run out of ink on the materials here. So if you'll just give me just a second to share the screen here. See if we can do that. Here we go. All right, so this is going to look a little weird for a second, but we'll change it fast. Oh, that's nice. They have a little bit of a P&P. All right, guys, so I'm just going to trust that you can see my slides in just a second, because from the looks of things, we're going to be okay, and then we'll roll. All right, so you should see my slides. Fingers crossed you can see them, because I actually don't have I don't have a clear view of what's happening on the screen right now, but I will continue to roll through this, and hopefully you can see this. And bottom line is, whether or not you can see the slides, we will be talking through these distinctions. So even if you don't have the visual, you're going to get an understanding of this verbally, if nothing else. So the big first piece to get about this is that your client has strengths, right? And those strengths are formed from their drives. They have deep, deep survival drives. But the key here to understand, before we even attempt to bridge a diagnosis between a diagnosis and real coaching here and transformation, is that your client's strength is their weakness. Your strength is your weakness. And what I mean by that, so I'm clear, is that if you've gone over some of the tutorial materials in immersion training, you know that these 4 survival needs, certainty, variety, significance, and love and connection, that they're paired opposites. They're the opposites of each other. Somebody who's got a lot of certainty, they're not going to get as much variety in their life usually, because they're so pushing for certainty. Variety and certainty are 2 opposite elements. Significance and love and connection are 2 opposites. Love and connection is a feeling of oneness with other people and kind of losing yourself in a relationship or a set of relationships, a community, let's say, giving up yourself, so to speak. And significance is all about you, right? It's kind of like the ego or the pride or the separating yourself from others, being different, if you will. The individualistic or individualism. that each of us are driven by to some extent. So we're all driven by all four of these, and these are survival needs. We have to meet them. But that's why they're such motivators for us. And that's why we don't really have an option as to whether or not we deal with the map that you're seeing on your screen, I hope, right now. So, for instance, if somebody's strength is certainty, and there's many people like this, people who have predictable lives, or their occupation is very certain. They're an accountant or a librarian. I mean, it's kind of like guaranteed that that's going to be the way it is, and their family and their friends and their entire existence is very certainty dominated. They're going to have a weakness very likely, which is variety. Now, that might not dominate their life. They might not care that as much about variety. Everybody needs some, right? But they're probably going to, a lot of people get bored in their lives. And the fact is, the reason isn't because life is boring. The reason isn't because they couldn't find adventure in their life. The reason is because they've become that. They become boring. They've become someone who's so certainty driven that they found a boring job, boring relationship, boring pastime, boring way of thinking. It's like, well, that's just the same thing over and over and over again. So no wonder you're starting to get bored. You got a lot of certainty, but you don't have much variety. So that becomes the weakness for this individual if their strength is certainty. And by the way, nothing wrong with that strength, right? Nothing wrong with having a strength. Everybody's got strengths. But it's important to understand the impact of those strengths, and there's a weakness behind every strength. Make sense? So here's another example. Somebody is all about love and connecting with people, and they're like on the team at work, they just like try to help everybody and try to connect, and at home, they're there to support everybody. They're like the mom kind of personality, that's cooking everybody dinner and making sure everybody has what they need to live their lives. But at the end of the day, they miss out on, let's say, their weakness, significance, right? Everything's love, 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 love. It's all about other people. It's all about connecting. And they end up losing their own personality. They end up losing themselves. Have you ever heard this as a coach or as a friend? Somebody comes to you and says, I love this person, or I love this my family, but I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. That's just another way of saying my weakness is significance. Like, I don't know myself. I don't have a significant identity or a significant thing to offer, right? A significant sense of who I am, right? It's just another way of saying I'm really strong with love and connection, and I'm weaker with significance, and I don't feel that at this point. So here's the real problem with this. Even though somebody will have a strength and they'll get that need usually fulfilled pretty nicely as a result of that being their drive, right? Being the more motivating need in the survival hierarchy, right? Because we all have to decide which of these are most important. But the problem that comes with that is that this paired opposite in that spectrum ends up being something that they usually don't focus as much on, or they don't put as much emotional energy into, or they don't even take any time to work on that part, or they've let go or given that up, or they might have a limiting belief that says, I can't have significance if I want love. I know early on in my career, I actually had a limiting belief that said, if I really am successful in my business, then my father won't love me because he's not very successful for himself in his own career. So whenever I do pretty well, he gets a little flip about things and kind of doesn't put me down, but you can tell he's not real happy. He doesn't feel really very connected to me anymore. Doesn't want to connect as much. So I took that as a signal to me, like, I want love more than significance, so I'll just give it all up. And I had that belief for a while. Now, eventually, because I understand this technology, I conquer that belief. Like, I ripped that to shreds. I was like, forget that. I'm not going to have a life where I don't even have time and the means to travel and see my father and connect with him. Like, I'm going to have a great life, and I'm not going to take any less than the full significance of the contribution I can offer to the world. But it really took some work from me to work on that love versus significance, strength/weakness. And so this is not a unique pattern, right? And none of these patterns, when you look at these opposites, are none of them are really very unique. Now, You need to understand this. This is part of your diagnostic process. This is part of what you're going to share with your client in such a way where they actually get enough leverage to change. Because if you don't know where the wound is, if you don't know what they're missing out on in their life, well then, how can you share that, right? And you need to share it in a compelling way, and we're going to cover what that looks like in a second. So now, before you make this bridge from listening to coaching, you need a full diagnosis, okay? You need to have a diagnosis that includes the following, at least. The top driving needs, the strength needs, right? What are the needs that they overvalue, that they make most important from these 4 survival needs of the personality? You also need to know the top vehicle that they use to meet those needs. You need to know, like, what are they doing to get love, or what are they doing to get that certainty? What's the main line of how they operate? Is it an emotion? Is it a job? Is it a relationship? Is it a place that they live? Is it a habit? Like, what kind of vehicles do they use? You also need to know the key beliefs that meet that need. What are the beliefs that set it all up so that they can make sure they meet whatever their strength need is. Then you need to know what the wound is. This is just another way of saying the weakness. Like, what's their weakness? What's the wound need? You need to understand what that is. And then finally, the key belief that causes the wound. Now, by the way, the key belief that meets their needs currently could also be the same belief that causes the wound. That could totally happen. Now, that said, there can be different beliefs. So that's why I put this twice, is because it's possible that you'll find beliefs that orchestrate meeting their needs that are actually pretty empowering. And then you'll find a key belief that causes it so they can't meet the wound need, whatever that might be, the weakness need, so to speak. So hope that makes sense. Now, let's get into what you would actually say. So you're going to share your diagnosis, and you want to share it in this very specific way. You want to acknowledge your client. Whenever we say them, it's just your client, right? Acknowledge your client for the vehicles that they have used to meet the needs that they're currently meeting by running their pattern. So you acknowledge them for their current pattern, right? Whatever their pattern is, right? There's always something to acknowledge. There's always something to appreciate. There's always something to compliment about somebody's pattern, even if it's a greatly debilitating pattern in many ways, right? There's always a secondary gain. There's always, not even a secondary gain, there's always a positive intent that drives someone's pattern, even if it's a very destructive pattern in other ways. You got to acknowledge your client for this first, because that's part of identifying this pattern. It's also part of how they'll be able to hear you as you share some other things that are going to be quite challenging for them to hear. So you might say something like, you, Mr. Client, are amazing in your ability to blank, like whatever vehicles, right? Your ability to work so hard. And I see how that's whatever needs are being met by that, right? So it's like we got a really hard-working achiever that's really significance-driven and they have no relationship, right? You might say, John, you're amazing in your ability to work so hard and get the job done in ways that most people would never be able to do. And you know what? I can see how that's actually met your survival need for significance. I can see how that has made you like an important figure in your community, and an important figure at your job, an important figure in your business. I mean, that's amazing how you've done this. And you got to say this sincerely. This is no BS, right? So that's where we start. These are their strengths. This is their need that is a strength that they're meeting already, and it's the way they've vehicled their life, right? It's the way they've kind of put together the external behaviors and relationships and roles and objects in their life such that they can actually meet those needs. That's like external strategy to get the internal part, the internal world dealt with. I mean, that's what everybody's doing at some level. And you want to get them to agree that they've accomplished something by meeting their needs in this way. So you might tag it with, does that make sense? Or do you agree or disagree with what I'm saying? I don't want to say anything that's not true, right? You just give them a chance to respond, right? Get them to agree that they've accomplished something by meeting their needs in this way. Okay. Second step in bridging from the diagnosis or the listening phase to the actual coaching. You're going to share with them the key belief systems that have allowed this to occur. Share with them the key belief systems and or mindsets, if you will. This is another way to say belief system. Belief systems orchestrate mindsets, of course, that have allowed your client to meet their needs. So you might say something, these are a couple different options here. Your belief that work is most important, or your belief that, average sucks. Whatever they've said to you before that is really intense, they're hot buttons, that's what you insert here, right? Your belief in total domination of the marketplace as being the priority for you in your life, I see how that's reinforced this way to actually meet your needs. Or you might say it this way. Hey, you know what? The fact that you actually believe that you have to be the best, that actually explains a lot about what I just described. Okay? So you're just chiming in on what the belief systems are. And again, these are beliefs that in some way probably empower your client. If nothing else, these beliefs help them to meet the needs that you just outlined. All right. Third step in this script, you're going to share with them the needs that they are not meeting by running this pattern, however. Right? These are the wounds. These are the weaknesses. This part of your share should be emotionally charged. Make sure that you use your voice tempo, tonality, volume, etc. to make this part of your share impactful and help them get associated emotionally to the cost of this pattern. Okay, I'm going to say all this again because that's a mouthful. I'm just give you a little extra explanation this time. Share with them the needs that are not being met by running this pattern. So whatever they're like, if this individual is like achiever, John's an achiever, and John gets tons of significance, maybe he's not connected because he's like separated himself from everybody else, right? So he loses out on connection and love. You're going to share with John that he's not meeting those needs at a very high level. This part of my share needs to be emotionally charged. So I'm going to have to share this in a way that's charged with emotion, the emotion that should be associated with this loss, let's say. And you make sure that you intone your voice. And by the way, if you're face-to-face, you'd also do this with your body language as well, of course, to make this part of your share impactful and help them get associated emotionally. Like somebody who knows they need to make a change, if they're disassociated from the emotion that would drive that change, they're not going to change. Was just listening to some coaching today where somebody said, a lot of people that smoke, they know they shouldn't smoke, and yet they keep smoking. They already know they could get cancer. They already know that they could get emphysema. They already know this could kill them someday. Why do they keep doing it? It's simple. It's because they're not associated with the pain of smoking. They're actually much more centered around and focused on the pleasure, the current pleasure of smoking. And now you might say, well, that's just because the pain is far in the future. Well, that doesn't have to be. They could associate that pain now. They could feel the cancer growing within them. They could feel what it feels like to be drowning for breath and die that way, die from asphyxiation. They could feel that, right? They could imagine that vividly. They could feel the emotion and the physical pain and the fact that they're not going to be around to see their kids and on and on and on, right? They could feel that too, but they don't. They're not intensely connecting with that motivation, with that feeling, that pain, if you want to call it that. Motivation is just pleasure or pain, right? And so as a result, they don't change. So your job as the coach is to right that wrong, is to square that circle, so to speak, right? Because, it would seem that somebody's smoking 2 packs a day and they're on their way to death. It's like, it's just insane. But to them, totally, I don't know if it makes sense, but emotionally, it absolutely makes sense with the way that their brain is currently wired. Your job is to rewire that brain. Okay, so share with them the needs that they're not meeting by running this pattern, but you got to do this with some oomph. I had a technique, you can search this on the internet, it's available, it's called the Jolt Technique. I'll link to it in this video in the tag. I think it's like one of the first videos I ever posted like on YouTube, and you'll be able to tell because the sound quality horrible, and it's an old SD video, right? I think it was like 2008 that I posted this. But it's called the Jolt Technique, and it actually covers how to convey things in a way that's emotionally jarring. That's why I call it the Jolt Technique. This actually borrows a little bit of that methodology. It's not really the same thing. It's not like this is just an advanced Jolt technique, but it's similar in nature. So if you're good at the Jolt technique, you're probably going to be good at this because you already understand how to impact your client in this, very, very intense emotional way. So let's get into the actual script of this. So we're talking to John again, but John, you're missing out on love. Right? I mean, that's pretty simple. It's just whatever the wound need is. But you know what you're totally missing out on? You're missing out on love, John. Or I might say it this way. Again, I'm just giving variations on this. You get the idea. This is not about you having to say certain words. It's just giving examples on how you assemble the way of characterizing these things for your clients so they get it. But John, the need that you can't fulfill by doing this pattern over and over and over again with the intensity that you're doing it in is love. And then here's one more variation on that. But as a result of all this, you've lost love. Right? Now, if I say, if it's the opposite, it lost significance, I might have a very different state of mind. I might say, as a result of like being all about love and all about just connecting with everybody around you and your family and placating them, you've lost yourself, you've lost your significance, you've lost who you are, right? I might get angry in that area. Whereas here, like losing love is probably going to be more of kind of a sad tone, right? Because you can feel the sadness of losing love. It's not exactly like I lose love, I'm not like, oh, I'm all mad about it. Some people do act that way, but frankly, they're just covering up their sadness because they're scared to heck about actually dealing with the real feeling of losing love, right? So your tonality would be associated with that in that way to help them get associated to it. Because if you can intone it, you're the leader, right? You're the coach. So a leader goes first. If you can get yourself to embody the force or the energy or the sadness, for instance, that you need your client to experience, they actually might go there. They have a choice. It's up to them. They could disassociate, disconnect with you, or just make you wrong. But if you have any kind of rapport with them, there's a good chance they're going to take some of that on. So more to this, you need love and you don't have it. So I would add this. I would like that first section with this section. I would use a little bit of each of these, right? So I'm really going to be intense. I'm like, you need love and you don't have it. Or you live without love at this point in your life. You're totally disconnected. You live without that as a result of living this way. You get what I'm coming at here? So I want a little bit of the first, and then I'm going to share this as well, just to really put a point on it. So, yeah. All right, so that's, is that 3 or 2? I think I got double 3s here, so I apologize about that. But anyway, here we go. So this would really be part 4. It says 3 up on the screen, but we'll go with it. So next step in this bridge would be end this part of your share. Actually, you know what? This is a continuation of 3, so let's just call it a continuation of 3 because you're really still sharing. You're in the middle of sharing the wound and sharing what they're missing out on. So you end this part of your share with a question that elicits emotion. And so that question would be something like, how does it feel to miss out on love? Or what's it like to live without love? Or what's it like to live without that? Very simple kind of, what's it like? What's your experience? That kind of thing. And you're really asking, you want to hear from them at that point. So you're testing and probing and provoking for what their feelings are about this. All right, so that, and by the way, one other, this isn't in the slides, this is in my notes here. Give them time to feel and impact the answer. I'm sorry, let me say that again. I'm reading, I apologize. Give them time to feel the impact and answer you. So don't just ask this and move on, right? This is where you want to slow down. By the way, if you're a really fast coach and you just move really, really quickly, during this part of the share especially, you need to slow down because the way that people feel things takes longer than what they see or what they hear, right? The representational system of a kinesthetic, a feelings take a lot of time to kind of show up. I mean, other than if your hand's on a hot stove, right? So So slow down your speech and let them feel it. And by the way, that's also going to help you feel it as well. So when you ask this, like you should be moving in a more kind of a feeling place. How does it feel to miss out on love? See how slow I shared that or I asked that? You could even slow it down even more, right? Some of the most impactful communicators in our history are communicators that communicated slowly, but they communicated to the feelings. They communicated to the heart, so to speak. Check out Martin Luther King and one of his famous speeches. It's like that guy talked really, and I mean, he sped up sometimes, right? But only at the climaxes, only at the apex. He would start by talking in a very kind of easygoing, although kind of a rhythmical format. It was kind of deep feeling type of pitch and tempo and rhythm that he provided. So this is where that's extremely important, and where a lot of coaches that are just really fast moving and thinking and acting will just not be effective with their clients in this area. So that's really the tag on 3, is getting them to respond to you and give them time to really feel it. Silence is fine. Let them feel. Let them actually experience this. All right. Finally, we're at number 4 here. Share with them the key belief systems that prevent them from meeting the needs that they're not meeting. Share the key belief systems that prevent them from meeting those wound needs. Like, for instance, for John here, our example, love, right? So you're actually gonna focus on the key belief system or systems that prevent John from meeting love. And so you might say something like, and you'll never get blank, i.e., this is really the need, right? You'll never get the need, Matt, by believing this. So, right, you never get love believing that you have to work all your life. You know, you'll never get love as long as you believe that, you know, that you'll lose yourself and your greatness if you love another person, right? Whatever you think their belief is or whatever they've shared with you, because you've had a full diagnosis at this point. That's the only way that you can do this effectively. And this could be an add-on, or again, it could be an alternative to the other parts of the script that I just shared. How could you meet that need very well when you believe that you have to do this on your own, right? Again, whatever the belief is. So you are, by the way, this is really key because they should be in a fair amount of emotional pain or at least concern at this point. They should be deeply concerned about this and actually be buying into this. So if at that point you actually bring up the limiting belief or beliefs that are stopping them, they will associate to that belief whatever pain they're feeling, because now they're talking about it and they're experiencing it. That's what we want to do. I mean, that's the leverage step. So we've now successfully bridged from just listening and trying to understand to actually going to step 2, the leverage step, where we're literally starting to move them to action. And they're not going to act necessarily while they're on the phone with us or while they're face to face with us, but they're going to be in that state of being very, very motivated at this point. So, I mean, really, that's it, guys. Let me stop the screen share here so we can wrap up. Let's go back to full. There we go. All right, phenomenal. So, look, if you got questions about this, let me know. I am working on putting together a worksheet, not a worksheet, like more of a kind of a guide to this. So all of those conversational frameworks that we just talked about, I just demonstrated in that little example. If you're in Strategy Immersion Training, this will be part and parcel to this conversation, that there will be basically what I have written down here, what I had in the slides, in a kind of guide that takes you step by step, kind of word for word scripted, so to speak, through this conversation. So next time you get to the point where you're running a free session or like a discovery session, or you are working with a client that you know needs to change, like take them through, you'll be able to take them through and just read off the page with what you've plugged in. Or, by the way, between the work that you do with them, like between sessions, you could actually, because you've diagnosed what's going on for this client, you could actually write that out ahead of the next session and then share that with them because you're uber prepared. This is what I had to do initially as a coach because I wasn't that quick to just like go for it, just being in the moment and dancing in the moment. I was slower in my ability to kind of connect the dots at that point because it's just lack of experience, if nothing else. And so between sessions, I would think really deeply about what did my client need? What was going on? What was the belief system that's preventing them? I still do to some extent. And as I thought about that, I would write down what I need to cover with that client next time, and I'd be prepared with that. So you can use this as a way to bridge from just, oh, I'm just there to listen to you, to, okay, look, now I've got to serve you. Now I really need to give you what I believe is what you need. And you know what? It's totally okay if you think I'm wrong and I didn't hear you, I don't understand, but that's okay because I'm not you, and I'm here to be your coach, not just be a listener, right? There's all sorts of different ways that you might present that, or transition to this conversation, but it's actually very smooth by the time you're at this point where you truly have a full diagnosis. So, hey, Josie, good to see you. By the way, if you are watching this, especially on YouTube, then just subscribe and hit the bell. So, because we're going to be doing these especially while we're in certification, you might be watching this on replay, so we might not be in certification training right now. We're going to be doing daily live streams. This one is a part of the Strategy Immersion Training series. And so as these come out, you'll be able to see some of this advanced stuff as we share them with our Master Coach University Mastery Program students. And same for certification or whatever else we're doing at this time. So make sure you hit the bell. It'll remind you. And then also, I would request humbly that you help me reach our change makers and our people helpers and our leaders and our coaches in our society to help them do what they do better. Because if you haven't noticed, there are a ton of people out there that are really trying to help, but they're struggling because they either don't know how, or they think they're at the point where they can really make a difference, but they're not yet. And they're really good marketers, or they're really good at selling their service, but they're not so good at necessarily actually making the impact that they want to make. And part of my mission is to support them and serve them so that not just our industry selfishly as coaches, that we are kind of not just held to a higher standard, but also appreciated more for what's possible that we can give, but also that anybody that's out there trying to make a difference, for somebody that I'll never meet, that you'll never meet, that they can make a difference too. And our entire world gets better as a result of that. So that said, I'll post that link to the Jolt Technique, so you have a chance to check that out. It's also in our YouTube channel. And then I'll also post a link for anybody that's watching on Facebook to the channel as well, so you can pop over to YouTube and sub to that channel as well. If you're in this training, if you're in Strategy Immersion Training or any other training that we're doing these live streams, you'll be receiving notices via email as to when we're doing these, so you have a chance to check it out, or at least see the replay if you're not here live as well. And look, if you got any questions about these, or you do it and it works or it doesn't work, let me know. I'd love to hear the kind of results you're getting or the challenges you're facing with this, so I can make this better, because it's always a developmental process for me to be sharing these techniques with you, because I'm out there doing this every day. I coach a couple days a week, 9 to 5 or later than that a lot of times. And so I'm really we kind of working double time to make sure that I'm able to extract what I do and then organize it in a way that you can take on and start working with, so eventually it becomes like automatic for you. It becomes as natural as breathing, like it has become a lot of times for me nowadays, and I want you to have that experience as well. So take care. I'll look forward to working with you in the next live stream, and I'll talk to you then. Have a good one.